Good evening. Tonight I will narrate one glitch in the Matrix experience for you. Now sit back and relax. Author name: Red Leaders. Story title: I died in late 2015. I was given a second chance. I have never used Reddit before, but a friend of mine was talking to me about the glitch in the Matrix subreddit, so I decided to share my story here, since I don't have any explanation for it almost 3 years later. Rewind back to September 2015. I was a freshman who had just entered high school 2 weeks prior. Already, school was weighing down on me, and I'd been continuing a bad habit I had of going on walks to clear my mind. On this day, I'd been walking around a pond near my house. There's a trail that goes around the pond, and then the trail leads up to a set of abandoned train tracks on the other side, which sit about 15 feet above the path and pond below. After walking the circle, I was crossing the train tracks when I decided I wanted some ice cream. The fastest way to get to the ice cream shop was to take the path below the train tracks. But there isn't any way to cross the pond without going all the way back around, and being 14 years old, I decided that I could just jump from the tracks onto the path below and keep walking. Looking down from above, it didn't seem to be that far of a jump, so that's what I did. The next thing I remember after that was being half conscious in an ambulance. Everything was extremely blurry, and the paramedic sounded slightly panicked. I wasn't able to move either of my legs, so I think they were both broken. The scene continued on for a few minutes until we arrived at the hospital, and I was wheeled into the emergency room on a stretcher. I only had a few minutes in emergency before I eventually lost all consciousness, and that was the last thing I saw. After I'd been unconscious for what felt like about an hour, I opened my eyes and I was on the ground. I just hit the ground after jumping, but this time I was fully conscious. I hadn't noticed this before I jumped, but there had been a car parked, watching me. I think they thought I was attempting suicide, but it probably did look that way, and the people in it had jumped out and called an ambulance for me. The ambulance ride had been exactly the same as it was in the first time, and I was put into the same emergency room that I had died in before. The only difference between the two events were that I was fully conscious this time, and my injuries were much more minor. I was discharged from the hospital the same night, with only stitches in my lip, a slightly fractured jaw, and a mild concussion. For a while after this, I assumed that the first scenario had just been a weirdly coincidental dream that I had while I was unconscious, so I didn't consider it anything abnormal. It wasn't until a few weeks after, when my mom told me that the people who had helped me said that I had been conscious the entire time. I hadn't been knocked out after hitting the ground or anything like that. So, that entire scenario managed to happen in the few seconds it took for me to hit the ground, while I was still conscious. Anyways, I'm not very good at describing things, especially with how blurry this day was, now that it was years ago. But I'm 17 now, and I still have no way to explain what happened that day, other than I died, and I was given a second chance. Personal thoughts. Oh, I love stories like these, where it just brings back the idea of quantum immortality, where maybe in the original timeline you actually did die. What happened, what you saw, was real, and then you died. But then in this reality, the one you now occupy, well, the one you, quotation, how do you even explain that? There's an ethereal component that is beyond the sum of our parts. I don't want to call it a soul, but there's something there that makes us unique and consciously aware. And I don't know what it is, but anyways, that thing seems to transfer. If you die in one reality, well, it jumps to another one, I guess the one that's most similar to the current one you were in. And that way, you keep on living. The only way you can really die is if an event would happen that kills everyone in every alternative reality, like maybe a meteor crashing into the world and killing every human being, then you probably would actually die. Obviously, there's no proof of this, but all these anecdotal stories are very interesting. At least to me. Because I want to live forever.